Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I just want to apologize about yesterday and thank you for being so willing to work with me. I am feeling a lot better and therefore I'm able to record this today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to yesterday, but you'll get this video and the slides, and then Friday we'll do a little recap, and then we'll go directly into the last half of the lecture. So I'm just going to do a recording. So let me share my screen. Slideshow, play from start. So you can kind of see me up in the corner, but you'll have the slides here as well. So we covered this not very smoothly, so quickly I'm going to go through this again. So we know that culture and context influence each other to some degree. All of our interactions are influenced by cultural perspectives, social perspectives, physical settings in which they're occurring. What is the setting that this communication is occurring? Shared communication rules are going to help determine if it's going to go smoothly or not. So we have rules and we have to follow those rules. And if we're following those rules properly, it's going to tell us if this interaction is going to be smooth or not. Culture also helps us determine the appropriate communication behavior, so how we should act based on the social and physical contexts by prescribing those rules. And context is all about what is the situation that we're in? What is the interaction, okay? So there are social rules, there are physical rules. Think about how much eye contact, how much touching is allowed based on different cultures, okay? So just a quick recap. We got to this one as well, but again, communication is rule governed. We have rules that we have to follow, what we can and can't say, what we can and can't do. And those rules are really specified by the situation that we're in, the context. And then they are culturally diverse. So basically what this means is that we all have specific rules based on our culture. And we know that the context is going to change some of those rules, like more formal, less formal, things like that. But it's really going to be dependent upon our culture itself. So we know that it's culturally diverse. We know that our world is diverse. And these communication rules not only are specified by the context, but set by the culture. Okay, so here's where we're getting into some new notes. All right, so let's assess the context. First, we've got formality versus informality. Is this a formal situation where we need to be professional? We need to use words that are not slang. Informality, where we can use slang, we're hanging out with friends. It might make a difference depending, formality versus informality. Then we've got assertiveness versus interpersonal harmony. So interpersonal problems often arise when people from a culture value assertiveness and they're interacting with people from culture that value social harmony or interpersonal harmony. So assertiveness, stepping up, taking what you want, taking what you've earned, taking what you deserve, versus interpersonal harmony. Well, I worked for this, but I don't mind sharing with you. And we see how those tensions can arise because we have people that have problems of, I did this. This isn't for both of us, right? Versus, no, we can all benefit, okay? And the third is power distance relationships. So we get into egalitarian and hierarchical. So egalitarian is less power distances. Each person is kind of in charge of themselves. Everybody's kind of equals. Whereas hierarchical, it's more power distance, kind of this chain of command. So in America, we have more of a hierarchical power distance, right? I'm your professor, and I don't think of it this way, but there's me, and then y'all are a step below because you are my students. Think of me as like the boss of a company, right? So we assess the context first, those, and I think there's some more that we'll talk about here in a second. Oh. Next, we're going to start getting into the intercultural communication contexts, but the business contexts. So first is the international business setting. First, for intercultural communication, we have to do a really good job to learn how to conduct business in a manner that's going to accommodate different cultural rules. So this could be one context that you choose for your paper, where you want to see different cultural rules in different countries that might interact with each other. How do we conduct business that way? Having knowledge of these cultural differences, having cross-cultural teamwork within one domestic company or one team or international teams, multicultural collaborations. These are really important ways for an organization's success. Okay. Then we focus on this domestic business setting. And with the domestic business setting, we have a couple different areas that we grow or that we go with, sorry. Minorities, whether they're birth minorities here in the country or in another culture, birth minorities, because we know minorities exist within a culture as well, or they are immigrant minorities. They have come to a different culture from their own original culture. These are the fastest growing segments of US demography, okay? So with this, think about the demographics. It's been said that by like 2050, white Caucasian individuals will be a minority because other minorities are growing, they're coming here, okay? And this means that business, how we run a business, how we handle our business, how we communicate has to adapt our operations to appeal to all the different ethnicities. It's not just, okay, well, we're catering to white people, which we've seen has happened a lot in America in business settings. They have to adapt their operations. They have to appeal to those different crowds. And successful management is going to demand awareness, acceptance, and tolerance of varying cultural values. So it's not just, well, this is how we've done it, this is what we do. It turns into, well, this is what we have done, but what could we do to change? What could we do to make things a little bit better, right? Okay, so that's the first on business contexts. Let me see something really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right, continuing on, we've got business protocols. So with business protocols, there's a couple different ways. First, initial contact. How do we make initial contact with people of other cultures, people who are going to be clientele, people who are going to work for our organization or within our organization, right? First, there's direct face-to-face, cold calls, letters of introduction, right? We get those all the time. Next, we've got use of emissary. So a person sent as a representative of the organization. So think of like when you were getting ready to apply to colleges, somebody from that college might have come to your high school to come be that representative, right? They want to be the representative to get you to their university, okay? So those are how we do initial contacts. It could be face-to-face, we're meeting, we're talking, I call you on the phone, or it could be I send a representative, okay? Then we've got greeting behaviors. So again, goes back to informality versus formality. Depending on the culture that we're meeting with, what type is really necessary. And then there's verbal versus nonverbal. So a handshake, verbally saying, hi, how are you? Welcome, things like that, okay? So those are some of the business protocols that we follow. Continuing on, personal appearance. So what constitutes appropriate dress, right? Business casual, business professional, just regular casual, okay? So this is a thing that we really have to pay attention to. What do we expect and what does the other culture expect as well? Gift giving, and this has to be distinct from bribes. So who are we giving a gift to? What are we giving them? When are we giving them? And how do we gift it? That makes a big difference, right? Gift giving, because if it's seen as a bribe, that can make the whole interaction negative from the start. And that means they don't want to work with our company anymore or our business, or maybe even our culture in general. And then there's conversational taboos. So are we talking politics? We got to walk that line pretty finely. With politics, we have to make sure that we are not threatening other people, that we are not offending other people. We shouldn't share too much personal information. We have to watch the jokes that we tell if we're telling jokes at all. There's a lot of business protocols that can really ruin an interaction within this business context. Okay. All right. So there are some business culture's key principles, right? Culture influences a lot of what we do, from our organizational style to our leadership style, right? So what does our organization put out there to the public? What do our leaders act like? How do they make decisions? The degrees to their formality versus informality. In-group members versus out-group, who are leaders putting their most time and resources in, the methods that we use to motivate our employees, right? So we have to think about that within an organization, but also when we're working with other cultures, right? Because it might be seen as something good to be in group with the boss here in America, but in other countries, that might be seen as a sign of disrespect, right? So we have to be aware of what are these key principles? What makes sense, okay? With business, we often deal with negotiation and conflict resolution as well. So I'm going to talk about, I think it's 3 different countries. The first is Brazil, and how they negotiate things. This might be an area that you want to explore for your research questions, right? So Brazil, they value the particular over the universal. So they value things in business that make sense for their company over what works for other companies. They value what works best for them over the entire company as a whole. Okay. They value a relationship over a task. So it's not such a big deal if they don't get the task done, as long as they're building connections with that other person. Sorry, my dog walked out here. Okay. So they also value the polychronic over the monochronic. And we'll learn about that later in the semester, but polychronic is just focusing on many things at once, multitasking, versus monochronic, doing one thing at a time. Okay. Group over the individual, so a collectivistic culture, and being more flexible versus less flexible. Okay. So that's Brazil. Okay, then we get into China. So China is a little bit different than Brazil. The status of a team member in China is very significant. So the boss, very significant, lower level employees, less significant. They have direct and indirect use of language, so directly telling somebody, but also implying. Often, this is a source of difficulties for international business because, like here in America, we like direct communication. We don't want any indirect communication. So we also have group-oriented society and negotiations that are going to cover interests of different parties, right? So it's collectivistic, and they're trying to hit every single party that's there, not just one or two groups. Contracts are not really rigid agreements, but they're things that we adhere to, but it doesn't mean that things can't change. However, these contracts do establish the parameters of a relationship. Okay. And then we get India. India, it is necessary to establish personal relationships with who we're going to negotiate with. This is because they value those relationships over getting things done, right? Negotiations must follow formal procedures. However, the atmosphere can be friendly and relaxed, but they do follow formal procedures. And the plan proceeds in a series of steps over days, weeks, months, years, whatever it is, right? So with this, it's not something that we're going to accomplish in one day. It's something that we might be accomplishing multiple days or weeks. Finally, business organizations are high context, so they focus on more nonverbal cues, less direct communication, and they're high power distance, so more hierarchical, how we are here in America. CEO, VP, manager, you know, like that, okay? All right, so how do we develop our intercultural negotiation skills? First, we have to be prepared. We come to these meetings prepared. Then we develop sensitivity as to the use of time. So how do other cultures use time? Are they rigid like we are here in America, where, you know, we're expected to be to work by 9 and leave at 5 or stay later? Or are they kind of more fluid? Right? We need to listen carefully to them. We have to begin to tolerate ambiguity. There are things that we don't have fully defined, but we have to be okay with that. And then we also have to try to locate areas of agreement. So what works for us might not work in other cultures, but where's this common ground? Okay. All right. Next, we're going to get into the education context. So what is taught in culture is crucial to the maintenance and perpetuation of that culture, right? So what we teach in our cultures really matters. Think of like all the things that we weren't taught in US history, things that were kind of glossed over or things that really were not explained to us at all, right? That makes sense. It's crucial to how we maintain and perpetuate our culture. Cultures with formal education systems are going to focus on a lot of the same things like literacy, math, science, history, religion, right? So when we were in school, we all had to take English, many of math and science. Some of us might have taken a foreign language. We had to take some sort of a history class. There's all these things that are pretty common between cultures and the education. And history is taught in all culture, but each culture is going to emphasize their own past. Okay. So knowing how teaching occurs within a culture is really important for 3 reasons. First, it provides nature about the culture, it provides knowledge, about nature of the culture, right? So what is this culture like? What does this culture typically do? How do we tend to gravitate? It does provide understanding about interpersonal relationships among students, so peer-to-peer, but also students and teachers. What does this culture say is appropriate? What is inappropriate? And it illustrates the importance of culture. It illustrates the importance that a culture places on education. So with that, like think about it. Think how much we say, you have to go to college, you have to do this, right? We value that. We're saying you need that. You have to go for K through 12, you are expected to be there, right? It's not like we drop out after 8th grade typically, okay? There are some challenges to multicultural education, so having multicultural students. The goal is to prepare students to function as productive members of society. But majority and minority cultures are going to play themselves out in visible ways in the classrooms. Things that people of a specific minority are okay with receiving different communication towards them versus majorities, right? They play that out in very visible situations. Teachers are expected to find new ways to build bridges between students, diverse home lives, and educational experiences. So we can't just say, oh, well, that's not how I do it. That's not how the majority does it. And therefore, we don't have to do it that way. And then finally, a multicultural student body is important to the experiences of members of both dominant cultures and co-cultures, right? So the dominant culture, we are Americans, but within being Americans, it is an issue of, there's men versus women. There's the wealthy versus middle class, lower class, right? So we have to integrate experiences of both dominant culture and all the co-cultures within, okay? All right. Culture and education continued a little bit. Culture does influence our learning preferences, right? If you were to study abroad, they might teach differently than we do here or than I do here. Or if you have a professor here who is not from America, right? Culture influences our learning preferences. So we have to learn, what do we like? What do we not like? There's no agreement on the number of range of learning styles that exist. So everybody's going to learn differently. Everybody's going to be impacted differently based on their own learning styles. There's tons out there. And the ways of knowing, so the process that we use to think about and become aware of our universe, our world view, right? The ways of knowing is influenced by our culture. Our culture tells us, here's what we should know about. Here's what's most important for our students to know. Here's what's most important for our adults to know. Okay. All right. So there are cognitive learning styles that we talk about. And remember, cognitive learning is all about thinking and processing that information. So cultural learning preferences. So how we perceive, or not perceive, how we receive and process information. It's going to be dependent on your learning style, but also your culture. So are you more of a hands-on learner? Do you need to see a PowerPoint and learn? How do we do this? Field independence versus field dependence, which that one's not so important. So I'll cover that a little bit later, but just being aware how much of this field learning is necessary for us, right? So field independent learners perceive objects as separate and individualized, right? We are separate from our field. Field dependent learners perceive information through global perspectives, totality rather than just the individual. Okay. Again, not super important. So it's okay. Then we get into cognitive learning styles that are influenced by culture. First is cooperation versus competition. So how much do we cooperate with other people and how much do we compete against them? Then there's trial and error versus watch and do. So you try and try and try again versus I watch somebody do something a couple times and then I do it. Okay. And then there's tolerance versus intolerance for ambiguity. So I tolerate ambiguity. Oh goodness. Sorry. I tolerate ambiguity, things that aren't clearly defined versus I'm intolerant. I will not pay attention to any of that. Like it's not defined, so it does not matter to me. Okay. All right. So with education, we also focus on linguistic diversity. Okay. About 45% of public schools are culturally and linguistically diverse students, right? So they might be bilingual, trilingual, but that's about 45% of our schools. Education systems have to recognize and accommodate the needs of diverse learners through this instruction and English language learning as well, or ELL, right? So it's on the professor to try and work with students, but also the school as a whole. We have to work with these students and help them with academic instruction, but also learning the English language, okay? There is no common language in US classrooms. And I know this sounds really weird because you're like, all of us spoke English. However, think of all the people who don't speak English or English wasn't their first language. And this isn't just K through 12. In our class right now, we might have people who speak multiple language, okay? So we have to think about it's not just one language, even though we are one country. Dialects and language spoken by students influence teachers' perceptions of students. So if you come in speaking a different language, your professor or your teacher might have different perceptions of you. They might think, okay, I need to do better to make sure this student understands my language, or they might have negative perceptions as well. So we have to be aware of that. This might impact what we think of their academic ability, their learning opportunities, how we evaluate contributions to class. the way we're grouped for instruction, the way we form in groups or the students form in groups, okay? And then we've got some communicator characteristics in the classroom. So first, there's self-efficacy. Can I do this behavior? If my teacher asks me to write a sentence, can I write this sentence? Can I say this sentence? Next is the immediacy. How close do I feel with this other student or this teacher? And then we have empathy. I can put myself in their shoes. They can put themselves in my shoes, okay? So with a communicative, supportive climate, we attend to both verbal and nonverbal behaviors, and we think those accurately reflect and clarify feelings. So we try to be more genuine and congruent, right? We're the same for everybody. But there are some communicator strategies. So opportunities to discuss global topics, avoiding us and them. So it's not us versus them, it's all of us together. Allowing discussion about unique cultural beliefs and practices, and then sensitive to cultural customs that are going to differ. So being sensitive, being aware of those. Okay. Continuing on with some strategies, we remind students that school is a safe place for all cultures. We use culturally relevant proverbs. We ask questions regarding students' comfortability. We make connections with students, both personally and intellectually. Okay, so this is actually where I'm going to stop. So I'm going to stop the share. I will send these slides out. We will start with the health context. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything, please do not hesitate to reach out, and I will be happy to help anything. And again, I just want to thank you for being willing to work with me since I was not feeling good yesterday. So don't hesitate to reach out, and I will see you in class on Friday. Bye.